What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And today I'm going to talk about MS, right? Mara Salvatrucha. There's been a lot of videos out lately regarding this group, right? This gang. And I'm going to add to that, but I'm going to, come a little different. So there's this thing called the 503 program. And that's what I'm going to break down for you guys. Its origins in El Salvador and kind of what happened, right? As the MS had a fracture. I don't want to call it a split, but it was a fracture. And so, first of all, the way I got into studying MS was many years ago when I started doing immigration cases all over the country, right? West Coast, East Coast, in between. And a lot of those cases involved people coming from El Salvador seeking asylum, people getting deported because they were identified as gang members. And so I really started getting into learning about MS. So this is going to be the first in a series of videos breaking down different aspects of the group. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. And if there's particular things you want to hear about, leave it in the comments and I can probably touch on it, to be honest. So first, let's kind of go back the 90s, right? In the 90s in El Salvador, there's this guy, Bruno Ventura, right? His aka his brother. And he's in prison for armed robbery. He has no history of gang affiliation or anything like that. And he starts this clique, this gang, right, called the La Raza gang, which I think is interesting because nowadays the term La Raza, a lot of people critique that as a term that only includes, Mexico and Chicanos and Mexican Americans. Apparently, that's not how this dude felt. And so he organized that in La Mariona prison. And then it spread to most of the jails. He had a big set of rules. He used violence selectively. And yeah, at that time, they had some MS and they had some 18 that were in jail, of course, but they were looked at as undisciplined, drug addicts, reckless, that kind of thing. So as long as they were quiet and didn't interfere, then they were okay, but they were pushed to the side, right? They were second class within the prison system. They weren't respected. They were cholos, they were this, they were that, and they were kind of disregarded. And so fast forward, right? December 2002, brothers transferred from La Mariona prison to Gotera prison, right? And as soon as he gets transferred to Gotera, they do a drug raid, right? With a bunch of drug cops and dogs and people in prison, killed all the cops and killed all the dogs, right? In Mariona. And so the general population was like, hey, you got to get rid of one of these gangs, right? Like transfer one of them out of here because this is off the chain, right? So the warden, so to speak, put it up for a vote to the prisoners. Hey, man, who do you guys want to stay? Who do you want to go? So they voted and they voted for MS13 to leave, right? So all the MS13 was transferred to Ciudad Barrios prison, which used to be only for young people, but not anymore. And that's important because it's the start of the segregation policies in the jails. MS survived in El Salvador and continues to survive in El Salvador largely, by their prisons, right? And so now there's only 18th Street and La Raza inside Marion prison. Again, 18th Street is kind of looked at as cholos, but now they're getting bullied, right? They got the worst housing. They get the worst food. They get the worst of everything. And La Raza there is being ran by this dude viejo, Jose Posada Reyes, right? And his goal is to knock out 18th Street when the time is right. And you'll see how this goes. And so in August 2004, 18th Street tosses a grenade and attacks La Raza at Mariona prison. Now, La Raza was a lot bigger, but 18 had a grenade, right? And so 24 of La Raza members got killed. Dozens of them got hurt. Viejo survived because he had a pistol. And then they wound up transferring 1,000 prisoners. 400 of them were labeled as 18th Street. 600 of them were labeled as sympathizers. And they all went to Apenteos prison in El Salvador. So by 2005, Cuesta Quetzaltepeque and Ciudad Barrios prisons were for MS-13 only, in terms of gangs. Chalatenango and Cojutepeque were 18th Street prisons. And then Sonsonate was for basically like SNY, their version of SNY, when it comes to gangs. 2006, they rearranged that a little bit, right? Cojutepeque and Quetzaltepeque are for 18th Street, Chalatenango and Ciudad Barrios is for MS, right? Parts of Gotera and parts of Apenteos is also MS. Barrio 18, you know, a year later, they're down in Apenteos and they found La Raza members, right? Like 21 former La Raza members or undercover, I guess you could say. So they killed them all, right? And La Raza, or 18, I'm sorry, was transferred to Cojutepeque, right? And then they built Izalco prison for 18th Street. And then Gotera and Apenteos, you know, were MS-13. So it gets a little confusing, right? But you'll see in a second, this is not going to be a long video. 2009, Barrio 18 splits, right, between the revolutionaries and the Sureños. And that happens in Izalco prison. And so fast forward, the late 2000s, the prisons are very much, you know, very much segregated, right? 2011, they got Zacatecoluca prison, which they call Zacatras, that houses all their leaders. It's kind of like MS-13, right? I mean, it's not like MS-13. It's kind of like the Pelican Bay shoot, right? So everybody goes there. All the leadership of MS and the leadership of 18 are at this prison. Well, they're having a hard time communicating with the streets. They're having a hard time communicating with their, you know, their rank and file, their other members in other prisons. And it's rough. It's stepping on their business adventures, it's stepping on everything else. So what happens? They start to talk and they start to entertain the idea of a ceasefire, a peace treaty, right? Sounds kind of like the end of hostilities, you know, so that they can get out of the shoot. So in March 2012, 14 gang members from Zacatecoluca all kind of set up this truce, right? And the government had negotiators, right? From the president's office, President Funes, their Bishop Colindres was involved. The murder rate drops, right? Incredibly. Now, extortion goes up like 1,000%, literally. And you know, all the other activities go up. But the you know, the murder rate drops, right? And as part of this effort, it's also supposed to include what they call demobilization. So there's supposed to be school for people. There's supposed to be job opportunities, housing opportunities. Basically, gang members are supposed to be reacclimated into society, right? And for those of you that have heard, in 2004, they had started the Mano Dura program, which was basically like kill gang members on sight, right? And people can be pulled over due to being suspected gang members. And they were just ostracized from functioning society in El Salvador completely over the course of years. And so part of this peace treaty is to bring them back in the process, because they're like, look, you want us to stop doing what we're doing, but we're lepers in our own country, right? So make it, you know, make it worth it. That demobilization never happens. You know, private businesses just didn't trust gang members, and they was like, no, it's not going to happen. And then the public would not vote for anything that could possibly benefit them, right? And so that aspect of the peace plan didn't work out. Interestingly, the US was 100% against the peace talk, right? They thought that it was a bad idea. They thought the peace treaty was a bad idea. So was the leadership of the Catholic Church. Even though they had some bishops involved, the leadership was like, no, we don't want a peace treaty, which you would think is kind of odd, although Catholics do have a long history of violence, right? And the US is like, no. And shortly after, in fact, like months later, the US puts MS-13 on what they call the kingpin list, which allows them to seize assets They put 4 or 5 people on their supposed MS leaders. They didn't really have any access to seize, right? MS has never made big money. MS has never been able to really have even a cohesive drug trade, for example, amongst themselves, right? Neither in the United States nor, nor in other countries. And so they've been hyped up in this country, right? And I blame Lisa Ling and National Geographic, for the most dangerous gang in the world, shit, right? So anyways, and MS sets up this thing called La Federación, right? The federation that has members outside of prison, that has authority similar to those in prison, on and on and on. So MS leaders are sent from Zacatecoluca to Ciudad Barrios prison, and then some of them go to Gotera prison. Now, Ciudad Barrios, the people in Ciudad Barrios, some of them also went to Gotera, the ones that were already there. Ciudad Barrios is like the home of MS13. And it's luxury compared to incarceration in El Salvador. Keep in mind that standard conditions don't involve, adequate sewage. There's not adequate light or ventilation, right? People go crazy there all the time. 90+% of the food that you get in prison has to come from visitors. It's just not there, right? There's tons of oppression internally, right? You're sleeping in hammocks made of string, or you're sleeping on dirt floors, and there's 50 people in a little cell block that's supposed to be, housing 10. So prison conditions are trash, and yet here you have strippers coming in, right? And prostitutes coming in, and big screen TVs. And these dudes from Mara are ordering fast food, and the guards come get it, right? And they're living a life. And a lot of that is because they got cashed out. They made some concessions in this truce in terms of the government, right? So they were getting privileges from the government. They were getting money from the government to have this truce. And that becomes a central part of how this 503 program develops, shortly after. So in Gotera, that was where they sent MS people that the leadership just didn't want to hear from, right? Dissident voices, or, people that were just non-factors and whatnot. They sort of got pushed over that way. And over there, they had the normal prison conditions, nothing like what they had at Ciudad Barrios. One of the guys that's at Gotera prison, right, is this dude, Walter Antonio Carrillo Alfaro. We're going to call him Chori. That's his name, El Chori, right? And he's from Fulton, right, from the Fulton clique. So Fulton Loco Salvatrucha started in San Fernando Valley, and they're like the lowrider Mara dudes from California, right? And they view themselves, and they're often viewed as different than the ones in LA, who went through the whole stoner phase back when they were, Mara Salvatrucha stoners. And they were just poor, right? The ones in LA didn't have nothing. Not that the ones in San Fernando Valley were rich, but they're kind of considered high class, so to speak, right? And so he's over there, right? But they're a big factor, right? The Fulton is a big factor, both in the States and in El Salvador. And so he's over there, and he's meeting with people, and he's like, "Hey, fool, this is messed up. It's not how it's supposed to be." Now, he was never a senior leader. He was like an average middle management dude, right? But he started making a fuss, right? So late 2013, the truce ends, right? The truce ends. And once again, the leadership loses control over their manpower, right? And over their middle management people. In part because they get isolated, but more so now the issue is there's a lot of dissatisfaction. There's a lot of people that are like, "Hey, how come these leaders are coming out cool and we're not?" Right? And a lot of them are against the whole notion of the peace treaty anyways. They're like, "Fool, we're gangsters. We're not politicians." Right? And so you just took away our gangster, right? And this isn't how we get down. And one of the key things that people get in trouble for within MS is violating this rule of disrespecting the barrio, right? Disrespecting the gang. And that's a wide term, you know, that can mean just about anything, right? Of making it look bad, you know, stealing from the gang, just not upholding the gang's values, misdirecting the gang. So and that becomes a factor, right? But so El Chori is basically saying the leadership has disrespected the gang by coordinating with politicians. He's like, you know, we're not a political group, man, we're gangsters, you know what I'm saying? And so and all the resources, they're like, hey, none of that stuff got passed down. Like our manpower on the street still gets $15 a day to survive, you know, and these fools got strippers in prison and big screen TVs, you know what I mean? So like cowardice dealings with the enemy, to use some Northern California language, right? So when this happens, when this truce ends, now violence kicks up like crazy, right? The gangs are fighting each other, the gangs are fighting the police, everybody's popping, right? And so between January 2015 and August 2016, 90 police officers, 24 military officers, and almost 700 gang members are killed, right? And that's documented, you know, that's proven. So also 2015, like I said, MS gets sent back to Zacatecoluca prison, right? Zacatraz, their version of Pelican Bay. And over there, you have this dude, El Diablo, right? From Hollywood, from the Hollywood clique, Borromeo Enrique Henriquez Solozano. And while MS doesn't traditionally have one leader, right? They're kind of decentralized, and that's been both a blessing and a curse for them throughout their existence. If there was ever a single leader in El Salvador, it's him, right? And people would say that MS13 was Diablito and his 12 apostles, right? So he tries to organize a hunger strike to force another truce, but again, he doesn't have the influence, right? And the rank and file are like, nah, fool, we don't want to, you know, we don't want to connect with these dudes, right? And they've betrayed us. Some other MS leaders at the time is El Trece, right? Saul Antonio Turcios and Elmer Canales Rivera, aka Croc, right? And so 2015, El Chori from Fulton Locos, right, gets transferred to Izalco prison as part of the desegregation, because now the country is saying, well, segregating them in different prisons didn't work because it allowed them to grow stronger and grow more powerful because they didn't have no ops to really get off with, right? And it made it to where going to those prisons, you basically automatically became a part of those gangs or you became a victim of those gangs. You know, that was your only choice, which is also how the NF and MA were able to consolidate power within their respective regions and within their respective populations, is because the state of California had isolated them, right? Once the bloodshed was kicking up, they were like, all the MAs in these prisons, all the NFers in these prisons, because that'll stop them from fighting. Well, it did reduce violence between the two groups, but it enabled them to grow exponentially in terms of power, right? And we see the effects of that to this day. So there's an interesting crossover, right? And so he gets sent to Izalco, right? And his allegation is that MS got up to $25 million from the government and that they haven't shared, right? So he has most of Fulton back in his play, right? And like 12, 13, 15 other kind of MS programs that are on his team, right? And so when MS from Zacatecoluca came over there to where he was at in Izalco, he had told them, hey, man, you guys violated our model, right? Which is the gang does not sell itself or surrender. And then he started identifying himself as an MS13 revolutionary, which is kind of a play on what happened with 18th Street years prior, right? They split to the revolutionaries and the sureños. So he's like, hey, we're the revolutionaries. The difference is he's saying we need to build relationships with the MA in the US, with sureños everywhere, because we're gangsters. We need to align with these other gangs and do gang stuff and not do politics stuff and corruption stuff. And keep in mind that the threat of 18th Street is basically the recruitment tool for MS and vice versa, right? So when you take away them fighting each other, you take away a lot of their power in terms of this is why you need to rock with us. This is why you need to pay us. This is why we need to take over these communities, because if not us, it's going to be these other fools. Again, similar parallels happening in California, right? And so 2015, July 2015, Jory and his crew declare themselves a new Ranfla, right? They're the 503 program over there in Izalco prison, and they set up a new leadership structure. They kick to the side or kill all the MS13 in the traditional wing, right? The classic wing that go to Izalco. And there's Huilas, there's Kais that get intercepted from Jory that's calling meetings, but now he's also calling meetings in the streets, right? Of Fulton and Los Normandis and a bunch of others. Diablo uses a pastor, an evangelical pastor, who thought that he was helping reduce violence by passing this message. But he goes, hey, man, bring this to Jory, right? From one prison to the next. And the kite said for Jory to consult the biblical passage, John 8:31, which says, if you abide in my word, you are my true disciples. And so Jory's like, no, right? November 2015, Diablo over there in Zacatecoluca orders Jory assassinated. This other dude, Piwa, who was lined up with traditional MS, right? They call it that MS like the national leaders, right? So the national leadership, Piwa was lined up with them. For some reason too, because looking at his background, you would never suspect. Like he's from a clique that's not really all that, you know. But anyways, he's on Diablo's team and he's a moneymaker. And so he pushed for the green light, but Diablo had to authorize it, and also authorize the discipline of 70 Fulton, crew members, right? Very ranging in various manners of discipline. So he also says, Diablo also says, hey, security officers in the prison, cops, and their families, green light on all of them, because he's trying to pressure another truce because the power is waning, right? So the hit on Jory is passed because they have a Mara dude, right, an MS13 guy from Zacatecoluca who's going out to court. And there's also one from Izalco that's going out to court. They cross paths. That's how Palabra is sent that, Jory got to go, right? So, but it takes a little time to put together. So December 2015, Jory and his homeboys, they burned down a bunch of car dealerships that's controlled by Piwa, right? Marvin Adili Quintanilla Ramos. And he's from Criminal Gangsters in Ilopango, which is a small little group. But he was also working for the city of Ilopango and was pushing politics, like government politics. And he was getting like $400 a month from the mayor, right? Who later got indicted. And he was also collecting taxes from the cliques out there to buy guns from Mex. And he had this whole thing of like training 2 members from each clica to be a part of this special shock unit of MS13, right? And so, by early 2016, like January 2016, the national leadership of MS, right, Diablo and them, are like, look, fool, we got to squash this 503 program. Like, now. January 6, 2016, Jory and 2 of his bodyguards are killed with machetes. They're hacked up in prison, Section 2 of Izalco prison. Another one is hacked up, but he somehow survives. Izalco and a bunch of other jails go on lockdown, right? And they take like 80 to 100 Fulton members and isolate them, right? A lot of those Fulton members wind up later, not a lot, but a handful of those Fulton members later pay Piwa 40 racks for destroying the cars, right? And so they don't really want that smoke, right? January 2015, Jory's girlfriend gets killed. And that sends a real big signal to everybody, right? And in particular to the 503 guys. Look, fool, like, Jory was already dead, but they still killed his girlfriend after, and that kind of stuff wasn't really happening. Later on, like a couple days later, there's a dude in Ciudad prison, Ciudad Barrios prison, who just asked for an explanation. Hey, why did Jody get killed? Right. So he gets killed for asking. And there's like 50 other 503 members that are kind of killed in this purge. Right. May 2016, the attorney general arrests hella people for misusing $2 million or more in funds, illegal acts during the peace talks. Right now, people are getting indicted for providing fast food to strippers, everything else, right? And the allegations are that different people were transferred to different prisons as a part of setups and as favors and everything else. There's also allegations that MS members under the national leadership, like when folks were politicking, candidates were politicking, they would block off whole neighborhoods on the streets and be like, nah, fool, you can't even come in here and talk to people, right? Unless you pay or unless they're a part of the political party that MS is supporting. So MS really got involved in national politics in a kind of quiet, underhanded way, but that was also very visible. And they got very wealthy behind it, which again, MS is not a wealthy gang, right? But the leadership got it all. Again, sounds kind of like, prison gangs in California, right? The leadership come out a lot better than the manpower. But this stirred up a lot of dissension. Like I said, the whole 503 program is built on that disparity, right? So September 2016, Oswaldo Vladimir Lopez, called Snarf, right, from the Escalantes clique, says to El Salvador government, right, their gang cops, so to speak, right, and their feds, he says, hey, I can promise a split within MS if you take me and the people that I tell you and transfer us to this other prison, right? And so he's on behalf of the 503 program. And so they do, right? The government's like, cool. And so kind of, he's trying to facilitate what 18 did. So he makes that promise, but he says, we got to get out of Zacatecas and go to Ciudad Barrios, right? So they do. They get they get sent over to Ciudad Barrios, right? There's like 22, 26 of them, or 26 of the people on his list are all from Fulton, right? Fulton local Salvatrucha. And so December 2016, right? Duke, Luis Zalada, from Acajutlas, Joel Jesus Campos, called Largo, Jorge Duran, Payaso, and Snarf, they all go to Ciudad Barrios, right? And Raul Garcia, Fulton from Gasper, Edwin Juarez, aka Darv, Damian Zelaya, from Fulton, they called him Skinny. They all kill MS members in Zacatecas, right? Not all of them, but they kill, members over there. But what's a trip is they kill members in Zacatecas and then they get transferred to Ciudad Barrios, right? All those dudes. And so, which is a lower security prison. And so this comes back to the whole point of getting favors, right? These dudes that are getting moved that promised this break with the national leadership are killers. They're off the hook people, right? Some of them killed literally days before they got transferred to this other prison. And so, but the president the whole time is like, hey, I don't know what's going on. I don't have nothing to do with these transfers. I don't have nothing to do with nothing. But obviously he knew, and it was with the hope of political favors. But these 503 cats wasn't trying to push politics. They just leveraged that so that they could push their own agenda, which was to take over leadership of MS and take it in a new direction, right? So they're all transferred to Ciudad Barrios. And then June of 2016, all the 503 guys that were at Ciudad Barrios, they get sent to a whole empty section of Izalco. So they got their own spot in Izalco prison, right? The national leadership is saying, hey, because we boycotted FMLN, right, who was in charge at the time, the political party in charge at the time, who used to just be political prisoners back, back in the 80s and the 90s, but now they're a political party. They're saying, hey, man, because we boycotted them, that's why the government is trying to hurt us by facilitating this 503 stuff, right? And yeah, 503 kind of didn't like little aspects of the truce, but they didn't really know what was going on, right? And so they're trying to do damage control, right? Basically. January 2017, there's an effort at a second peace accords, right? It's 25th anniversary of the first one. They want to use the United Nations, the gangs want to use the Catholic Church, really politicians from the US and different US and international bodies all get involved. The people not involved are MS and 18th Street. They keep asking, can we be a part of these peace accords? And they're told no, and so obviously that doesn't work out very well, right? January 2nd, 2017, Raul Garcia, Edwin Juarez, Damian Zelaya, Zelaya, all from the Fulton clique, kill Juan Carlos Hernandez, who's a leader of the Hollywood clique, which is also the clique that Diablo's from, right? So they kill him in Zacatecoluca, right? March 2017, Ciudad Barrios is searched because the security folks get a kite that there's threats, that there's grenades at Ciudad Barrios, right? And that the Fulton 503 guys are involved, right? They're going to get hit or whatever. So they don't find anything, right? This is on March 4th, 2017. They search the prison, they find nothing. March 24th, 2017, guess what happens? There's grenade explosions at Ciudad Barrios prison, right? A dude, Wilfredo Tejada Erazo, who has like 5 different nicknames, right? Doogie, Flaco, Zorro, a bunch of others, who is a MS leader from Fulton, right? The 503 kind of stronghold. He gets killed, right? So a couple months later, June 2017, the national police and the government is saying, hey, man, MS13 and this 503 thing, that's why there's this big uptick in violence, right? And it was true, right? In July, people are trying to hold FMLN accountable, right? The people are trying to hold the government accountable, saying, hey, man, why did you do all this, right? And they're saying, hey, we don't know what's going on, but we have no explanation for why these high-profile, very violent people got transferred, right? So then there's a video, right? And some of you guys have seen or heard about these videos a few years ago, but there's a video. It's got 22 people, right? Snarf is one of them, and then a bunch of other people that was on his list when he said, hey, these people need to be transferred in order to facilitate this split, right? There's also a dude from New York on there. That's the one person from the US that's in the video, right? So they take a video inside Ciudad Barrios, right? And they say, hey, we're all the dudes that came from Zacatecas, right? And their intro is this, and I quote, right? The big MS13. Greetings to all the homeboys in El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, and all the United States. We are part of the homeboys that have just come down from Zacatecoluca. There are certain things that we don't share about what's going on inside the neighborhood. They use neighborhood synonymous with gang. Over here, we're one. We're one homeboys, and each of us is going to give his nickname so that you know who is here. And they'll have armbands that say 503, right? What's key here is there's a dude in the group, and he doesn't have a big role in the video. All he does is say his name and his barrio, right? His clique. But he winds up becoming a key figure, right? And this dude is Carlos Humberto Rodriguez Burgos, aka Cyborg. And a little funny story in paperwork, because the part of Cyborg was hard for a lot of people to pronounce. So he's Chai Boy. He spelled like 5 different ways. And then he wound up picking Esmaín, which was a character from a novella, right? But we'll just call him Cyborg in this video for these purposes, right? So he's from the Novenas Locos clique, right? Yeah. So those guys all get transferred. They make this video, right? Which is what they kind of promised to do, right? So they make this video, and then 22 of them get sent from Izalco, or get sent to Izalco from Ciudad Barrios, right? Cyborg gets released a couple days later, a couple days after they get there. Now he got released early. He had just done 18 years for killing somebody in one of the juvenile prisons. I think it was Gotera, but I'm not 100% sure. Could have been Ciudad Barrios. So back when they had youth prisons, he had killed somebody there, done another 18 years. And he was never really a factor. Like, he wasn't even a middle management dude. He was like bottom of the totem pole cat. Uh, and but the thought is the 503 folks used him because he was going home, because he was going to be in the streets. And so he could communicate messages to a broader audience on behalf of them from the streets, right? And that's exactly what he did. And so September 5th, 2017, right? A video is uploaded to the internet. Now Cyborg is the main speaker, right? They got a couple other people around him, but he's the main speaker. And he reads a memo. But this memo is not towards members of the gang, it's to the Salvadorian people, right? And he in this video and future videos, he calls MS13's national leadership MS truce. So like instead of MS13, MS truce. Now, mind you, 503 is still keeping the 13, right? They're MS13 of the 503 program. They want to build stronger relationships with, the MA and the Sureños, right? So they're not dropping that whatsoever. And they have roots in LA, but the national leadership did too, but they honor their gangbanging roots, right? And so he calls them MS truce, right? And he says, we definitively disassociate ourselves from all acts of vandalism carried out by the so-called MS truce against the government and civilian population. We are against the deaths of elderly people, children, students, and other civilians caused by the MS truce. Given that our gang is not a guerrilla group nor a terrorist group, we are against the extortion, rape, and kidnapping of all Salvadoran people and all acts which harm human beings in El Salvador, right? So it's a 6-minute video. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. But the gist is, is that, plead to the people of, hey, man, we ain't like these fools. And it's these fools' fault that all this stuff was happening. In the video, he also says MS has to keep killing 18 and any rival gang members, but we don't kill cops and we do not get involved in politics, right? And then the ending says, so now we want to say to everyone who wants to join us, the door is open. Everyone who wants to stop being used, the door is open. We are waiting. We came to regain the values of the gang, right? That's a quote. So you can imagine leadership, the national leadership's pissed, right? October 14th, 2017. So that's the second video, right? October 14th, 2017. Here comes a third video. And it's a lot shorter, 2 minutes and 18 seconds. And this is a message to, quote unquote, the homeboys of the international MS13. He calls MS truce rats, says the origin of their gangs is homeboys that came from Los Angeles. They did not teach them to do deals with the government, which is interesting because the national leadership is mostly people that came from the United States and came from LA and are some of the founders of the gang in LA at the time that are in national leadership of MS13 in El Salvador. So it's a little bit of propaganda there, right? And they just made a deal with the government to get transferred and create this split so that they could be become the leaders. So it's propaganda, but gangs are famous for propaganda, right? And so it goes on to say, we as MS13 503 program feel proud of the homeboys in Honduras, Guatemala, the United States, because as MS13 members, we share the same ideas. We want to ask of those who claim to be the bosses of the neighborhoods in El Salvador, from now on, they do not bring shame on us as a neighborhood by sending people to find 10 civilians for each member of the gang to give up their vote to corrupt political parties, because they're saying that's what the national leadership was telling people to do. Then they give shouts out to other countries and say, we have good examples in Los Angeles, Guatemala, and Honduras, homeboys that raise their heads and they're proud to be gang members, right? So yeah, there's that. So Cyborg, right? He gets killed March 1st, 2018. He's over there in Colonia Portales, a neighborhood in Mexico City, and he gets killed by two sicarios, reportedly working on behalf of La U, which is a criminal organization led by Roberto Mollado Esparza, aka El Betito. And the thought is that the national leadership in El Salvador hired him to do that. A lot of the 503 guys had dipped out to Mex, right? In part because of the persecution of the national leadership, and they still had the majority of people on their side. So the 503 dudes were dipping to Mex. They were also wanting to set up better relationships with Sureños. They were wanting to set up, drug trafficking and gang banging and get guns and everything else. The issue is a lot of people in Mex didn't want to mess with them, not only because of the age-long issues between people from El Salvador and people from Mexico, right? People from Mexico, the claim is people from Mexico think that they're better, that they've also taken advantage of the Northern Triangle and whatnot. So there's animosity on both sides, outside of gang stuff. So there's that, but also MS is just never been very good at setting up those networks in a large scale. And the cartels don't want to mess with quote unquote gang members, right? Because they don't want gang issues. They're about money. And MS has tried to be about that numerous times, but it's very difficult. And part of the reason it's difficult is their whole leadership structure, which I'll do a video in the future around that. And I'm also going to do a video on TPS, right? Temporary protected status, and how that influenced, Mara and MS and 18th Street, and both in the United States and in El Salvador. So like I said, there's future content coming up. This one's about done. I got a little bit more to share, but I'll break down, some of these other things in more detail. So he gets killed, right? March of 2018, March 1st. March 15, 2018, the US government intercepts a dude that's trying to cross over illegally from Mex, and he has a big MS 503 program on his chest, right? So some of the more recent indictments, the indictment in LA made some reference to 503, because the Fulton folks in Southern California, they really, they're on board with the 503 program. Some folks on the East Coast had been in touch. East Coast MS has been around since the 90s. And so some of them had been in touch with 503 leaders, right? And they kind of like that idea more, in terms of the gangbanging. And so they come up in some indictments. But for the most part, this 503 program is kind of squashed, right? There's little pockets, but they're probably never going to really get traction. And because the offenses that they claim are the foundation of their attempting a coup, basically, to take over the leadership, every year that stuff gets further and further back in history. And you got to keep in mind, 80+% of Mara is under the age of 24, right? Both in the US and El Salvador, so they're young already. And that makes their memory even shorter. So anyways, that's the 503 program in El Salvador. Like I said, I had a little bit of role in the US, and I'll talk about that in future videos. It's the Homie Hangout, man. We help others move in excellence and help yourself, right? Because you're worth it. And a lesson in this video is, this gang stuff, man, becomes political, right? And I've talked about it in terms of California prison gangs, but look at in El Salvador, it's happening. And the institutions and the government almost always play a central role in the formation and the conflicts between gangs. That happens up here, that happens down there. The government switches their game, right? Oh, we're going to separate them. Oh, no, that didn't work. Now we're going to throw them together. Now there's violence. Now we're going to try to buy off this group. Now we're going to go show favor to that group. It's more corrupt in El Salvador, but it happens up here too, man. And a lot of this stuff is similar to what we've seen with, prison gangs, in particular, the MA and the NF and those that fall up under them in some way over here. And so anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, man. Tap in. There's a lot of other comment. You'll see links to it. And I'll catch you guys next time.